Hello everyone, my name is Eileen Su. Today, I'd like to talking about language and communication development in Down syndrome. Totally, we have 5 group members. Before the slides, let's play a little game. The purpose of this little game is to see how much you know about Down syndrome. Let's start it. Okay. For the totally there are 4 questions. For the first question, what is Down syndrome? Down syndrome is a genetic disorder caused by actual chromosome. Next. Second, Down syndrome is caused by we just say Down syndrome is a genetic disorder, so Down syndrome is caused by an actual chromosome. Third, Down syndrome can be cured with treatment. Okay, it's false. The reason I chose false because Down syndrome is a genetic disorder, so it cannot be cured with treatment. It's so sad. Next. Okay, this is the last question. How many babies are affected with Down syndrome each year? I didn't know the exact question, so I don't know. Let's see. Okay, the correct answer is 6,000 babies are affected with Down syndrome each year. Let's come back to the slide. Okay, so what is Down syndrome? Biologically, in every cell of the body, there is nucleus, where genetic material is stored in genes. Genes carry the code responsible for all our genetic traits and are grouped along rope-shaped structures called as chromosomes. Typically, the nucleus of each cell contains 25 pairs of chromosomes, half of which are inherited from each parent. Down syndrome occurs when an individual has all or part of an actual copy of chromosome 21. This actual genetic material can alter development process and lead to features associated with Down syndrome. Some of the common physical features of Down syndrome are low muscle tones, short stature, sloping eyes, and deep crease in the center of the pain. Although each person with Down syndrome is unique individual and may or may not have this characteristic at all. So, language development. First, language is usually delayed for the patient who has the Down syndrome, and the importance of language and implication for intervention. These 3 perspectives I will talking about later. Okay, let's go to the first one. Language is usually delayed. Descriptive accounts of the development of children with Down syndrome almost always draw attention to delays expected in their speech and language development. Despite a wide range of individual differences, most children are late in saying their first word. Their vocabulary grows more slowly than in ordinary children. Although they use the same range of 2-word phrases as all children, they have difficulty in mastering too many rules of talking in grammatically correct sentences. This leads to speech of many teenagers and adults with Down syndrome being restricted to short telegraphics on tenses. For example, keywords without the function words. When swimming dad rather than I swimming last night with my dad. They also tend to have difficulty to pronouncing words clearly. The combined effect of talking in telegraph, attendance, and poor pronunciation often makes young people with Down syndrome difficulty to understand, especially if they are trying to talk about strangers out in the communicating rather than to those familiar with them at home or in school. Second, the importance of language. There are 5 reasons why does it need studying about the Down syndrome. This difficulty with learning to talk adaptively has several potential serious consequences for the children's development. From the end of the first year of life, learning to talk enables a child to communicate with more effective and complex way, to gain ever-increasing amounts of information about the world and to use language for mental processes such as thinking and remembering. The first reason, using speech. We are able to have control over our lives. We can ask for what we want or need, tell people how we feel, ask people information, share our pleasure and our worries, make friends and enjoy our social life. If we have only limited ability to talk deaf people, we will more isolated from others and our social and emotional life is impoverished. Second, once a child starts to understand spoken language, the world of learning expands dramatically. We can talk to our kids about everything we've done. We can talk about what we are going to do and what we did yesterday or last week. And child who learn language will be at serious disadvantage in accurate knowledge about the world. Third, psychology has also drawn attention to the ways in which language and speech are used in cognitive functions. Once we begin to master a language, we think in terms of work, reason slightly or aloud, recall and do mental arithmetic with the words. 4. Children with Down syndrome are expected to show cognitive delays, develop their knowledge and understanding of the world more slowly, and think and remember why. This cognitive delay may be partly the result of language learning difficulties. Any serious linguistic delay will inevitably lead to an increase in cognitive delay. Because language is a powerful tool for acquiring knowledge and for understanding, thinking, reasoning, and remembering. On the contrary, the more we can overcome children's difficulties in language learning and speech, the more they are to learn and improve their cognitive abilities. Finally, learning to speak is not the only form of communication we can use. Although it is the most effective form of communication, and research shows that communication is based on the first year of infant communication. So keep going to know more about the reason why we need to study the Down syndrome. Implication for invention. First, it is important for children to receive first-class physical care and physical therapy to keep the milestone of motor progress close to normal. Otherwise, the baby will not be able to process objects and explore. This leads to cognitive delays and language learning delay. Second, during the first years of life, it's important to allow parents to know the importance of early conversions and encourage them to follow the baby cues and not overwhelm them. with too much physical or verbal situation without involving the baby. Adults need to continue to be sentenced to children's effort to communication throughout childhood to encourage them to continue trying what may be difficult to task. If children can understand themselves by missing individual words and symbols, they may not be motivated to learn to speak in better sentences. Third, it's also important to encourage children to make as many sounds as possible to practice their word motor skills. This can be done in fun ways with songs, games, or nursing rhymes. There are many benefits to using writing language system. Symbols and characteristics can promote production and greatly improve production effectively. They can even help overcome ordinary memory problems during the beginner learning phase. Children will benefit from language teaching from baby head case. In addition to encouraging signature, parents can also be informed about various aspects of language development so that they can help their children. They can be encouraged to continue consensus expanding their children's dictionaries, and they continue to teach grammar. Here is my reference.
The language development of Down syndrome has a certain unique rules, and I found several researchers from the 1980 to the 2009 and summarized the development trend and changes of these researches of Down syndrome children in these years and the development characteristics of Down syndrome children in four aspects. They are phonology, vocabulary, syntax, and pragmatics. It is clearly that in the early research of the phonology, they are more concentrated on the problems and retardation during the development of Down syndrome children, and then concentrated on the progress of the development, and finally they took more attention on the specific elements such as the syllable structure, phonological processes, and the results show the Down syndrome leads to mental retardation, and mental retardation not only affects the Down syndrome children's language development, but its impact is even greater than the impact on intelligence. That is, a 5-year-old Down syndrome children's intelligence level is equivalent, and at the age of 3 years old, then the language development may be less than 3 years old. To be specific, in terms of language development, normal children in the babbling stage of 9 to 10 months will emit a lot of simple syllable combinations of vowels and reuse them. At a very important stage of practicing pronunciation and correcting pronunciation, children with Down syndrome have not entered this stage until they are over 1 year old, and many adults still cannot speak smoothly until adulthood. In terms of vocabulary development, the early research are more concentrated on the rough vocabulary development progress, and then they focus more on the specific development of each type of vocabulary, and found that the low starting point and slow progress are two characteristics of Down syndrome children during their vocabulary development. Compared with the normal children, the Down syndrome children's initial speech is about 24 months, about 10 months later than the normal children. The 3-year-old Down syndrome's vocabulary has even entered a normal 3-year-old child. Similarly, the research of syntax shows the same trend of vocabulary, and the grammar development should be considered the most impactful aspects. Although the entire development sequence is normal with a child, it is consistent, such as learning the declarative sentence first, then asking the sentence, negating the sentence, learning the initiative first, then learning the passive. But the speed of development is much slower. The normal child is at a grammatical level of 30 months, but the Down syndrome children is only possible for the 12-year-old. After the age of 12, you may have missed the critical period of language development. The various nerves has been connected and solidified, and the grammar ability may be stagnant. Finally, we can find the same trend of the research of pragmatics, that the results show the young individuals with Down syndrome displays a very complex profile of strengths and weaknesses in pragmatic aspects of language. Strengths tend to include use of a variety of communication functions, ability to stay on topics, responses to requests for clarification, and storytelling with sufficient content when visual support are used. And the research of pragmatics shows the same pattern of development of vocabulary and syntax. In summary, the language development of children with Down syndrome lags behind and much more slower than that of children of the same age. And the research of language skills of Down syndrome children focus more on the rules of development instead of just concern with the problems and retardation during the development. And they aim to find the appropriate ways to follow the Down syndrome children's development rules.
Next, we are going to focus on the issues of communication of Down syndrome. The researchers into communication problems with Down syndrome can be traced back to 1970s to 1980s. Scientists divided communication issues into two primary categories, verb issues and non-verb issues. Firstly, let's have a look at non-verb communication issues. There are two types in non-verb communication issues consisting of non-verb request and non-verb statement. In 1979, a scientist whose name is Bayes defended non-verb request as children's ability to research goals by asking others for help through their gestures and eye contact. He also defended that non-verb statement, which is known as collective attention, also through gestures or eye contact, is to direct attention to an object or event. Under this theoretical basis, in 1986, two psychologists tested Down syndrome patients in Norway to find that these patients had defects in ability of nonverbal statement, but they didn't differ significantly from the control group on nonverbal request. Another experiment conducted in 1988 having same theme also yielded similar result that Down syndrome only has influence on nonverbal statement. However, turning point happened in 1995. With a larger sample, psychologists found that children with Down syndrome also have significant defects in nonverbal request, which in return affected later expressive language development, and thus communication problems in patients with Down syndrome. This result has been adopted ever since. So, in conclusion, Down syndrome can badly affect both nonverbal request and nonverbal statement. And as these two are part of the foundation of the subsequent development of oral expression, when patients are advertently affected, it will naturally affect their later communication ability. When it comes to verbal communication, researchers have found that people with Down syndrome's abilities in different areas of language are respectively in different developing stages. For example, within an identical individual, the language competence significantly falls behind cognitive skills, and presentation skill falls behind receptivity. This imbalance in language abilities hold back patients from being able to do social tasks well in daily life. Some researchers have tried to find out if there is a connection between presentation ability and reading ability in people with Down syndrome, even if they found that people with Down syndrome have better reading skills, which in this case means the ability to read individual words, and poorer reading comprehension in this case means the ability to understand sentences. However, there is no further evidence to prove that this phenomenon is significantly related to the level of presentation ability of people with Down syndrome. So we can think that there is no significant causal relationship between reading ability and presentation ability. One thing we know for sure is that although some patients with mild Down syndrome are able to have simple conversations with others, the researchers found that the mean length of utterances of people with Down syndrome is generally shorter than that used by the average persons. At the same time, Down syndrome patients will often forget to use necessary morpheme and grammatical function words when they are speaking, and these usually become considerable obstacles for people with Down syndrome to communicate with others. In conclusion, all the symptoms mentioned below become barriers for people with Down syndrome in communication.
Here is my part, parent-mediated interventions, and this part will be introduced by me and Xinfang. And my part, I will introduce a paper first. It is an intervention review that parent-mediated interventions for promoting communication and language development in young children with Down syndrome. And here is an overview of the method for interventions. I will have, here's my summary. I will summary the method first, and then give you some basic information about intervention and comparison in this paper, and discussion from 6 aspects and some related conclusions. That is a very interesting paper. And as we all know, the parent-mediated intervention designed to improve communication and language in children with Down syndrome from birth to 6 years of age. And the intervention involved coaching, supervision, and support from a clinician, and took place either on individual or group basis. Not like parent-mediated interventions, and here's some comparisons like general stimulated conditions and intervention that use the clinician-mediated interventions, and control group that means no treatment or delayed treatment. And we include a study in which the parent-mediated intervention were delivered in conjunction with another intervention, such as a clinician-mediated intervention, as long as the latter was given to both intervention and control groups, and the parent-mediated intervention was provided only to those in the intervention group. And for the intervention and comparison, here's more specific introduction. There's some similarity, like a patient and population group is children with Down syndrome aged between birth to 6 years, and the setting all happens at home, clinic, or both. And intervention delivered through group or one-to-one sessions. But the difference is it's intervention and comparison, and the two types. The first one is parent-mediated intervention, and comparison is treatment as usual. And second is intervention, like parent and clinician mediated intervention, and comparison is clinician only mediated intervention. But both of them will be followed up certain times. And then they also discuss from the 6 aspects and have a comparison. Like first one is expressive language and receptive language. Second one, and changes in parental behavior and socialization, language attrition, adherence to treatment. And as assessment is beholden by like a parent report, language sample, experimental tasks, and also direct assessment, or maybe observational rating skills. And then the author had some conclusion, like in this paper the author found a lot of studies, but he just have 3 main studies to discuss. And the result, the finding from the 3 included discuss was inconsistent, and they found the children in the intervention group could use more targets, vocabulary items, or utterance with language targets in certain contexts. Post-intervention, and compared to those in the control group, and there was not maintained 12 months later. Because even we have a coaching, we have training for parents or children, but the effect of the training of the intervention is limited. And the third study found gain from intervention group on total language measures immediately post-intervention. And all 3 studies noted the differences in most measures of how the parents talk to and interact with children post-intervention. That means the parents' behavior is really affect children's behavior in the future, and also children's interaction. And it is also study means that language attrition following the intervention in either group, while one study found positive outcomes on children's socialization skills in the intervention group. That means children's socialization skill is really influenced by parents or by language attribute. And here's one study look at adherence to the treatment through attendance data, finding the mother is much more important in the group session. They play a more important role because they attended 7 out of 9. So even the author have discussed several papers, but she still lack of confidence in the result. So further research is very likely to have an important impact on our confidence in the estimate of treatment effect. And here's my part.
I can sing a rainbow.
Nathaniel is 5 years old. He is learning the colours of the rainbow.
Oh, Stack, can you do a blue circle? Yes, blue circle. Well done.
Talking about colours or how we feel
Nathaniel, how are you?
is something that most of us take for granted. But Nathaniel has Down syndrome, which means there are challenges with his speech. Teaching him requires skill from speech therapist Fiona Kenworthy and patience from his mother, Pearl Va'ufusuanga. 1 in every 1,000 children born in New Zealand has Down syndrome, a genetic condition, and almost all of them need one-on-one speech therapy like this, which actually gets no direct government funding at all. The Upside Downs charity says it costs families an average of $4,000 a year and up to $10,000. That is money that Pearl does not have. She is a solo mother of 2 children. Her husband, David, who had a good job as a financial controller, died of pancreatic cancer 2 years ago.
It's hard. It's very hard.
David was 48 years old.
And may the Lord punish me severely if I let anything but death separate us.
I have a lot of my moments, yeah, but you got 2 little ones.
She says Nathaniel's love of life helps in the tough times.
When I'm down and out and really he's there and he's smiling, I mean, at times it's like he's reminding me, hey, appreciate life, appreciate simple things.
Helping children like this is why the All Blacks Barrett brothers last night shared the story of their 16-year-old sister Zara to raise awareness about Down syndrome and help give the gift of speech to others.
Speech therapy has been like a lifesaver for me.
Fiona Kenworthy says the lack of public funding for one-on-one sessions isn't right.
And we know it makes such a difference. Yeah, it's unfair.
And here is the difference it can make. Tilly is 7 years old. She could only use sign language when she started therapy here, but that's all changed. She now has the power of speech and she can make friends. And she can sing. And she can sign off for News Hub.
Today, News Hub.
Now, we raised the issue of the funding gap for kids with Down syndrome with the government, and Associate Education Minister Tracy Martin said she didn't know about it. It hadn't been raised with her, but she admitted that we have a short supply of speech language therapists in New Zealand. The minister also said she would like to know more about this, and the Upside Downs Trust would be welcome to come and see her and tell her about it.
Okay, now let's focus on parent-mediated interventions for promoting communication and language development in young children with Down syndrome. We're going to do it from 4 parts. First is 3 stages interventions and how the intervention might work. Next is 2 related programs. The last part is our recommendation for intervention. First, there are 3 stages interventions. At primary stage, we offer the screening test and diagnostic test for Down syndrome to all pregnant women. Screening tests can indicate the likelihood or chances that a mother is carrying a baby with Down syndrome. Diagnostic tests can identify or diagnose whether your baby has Down syndrome. At secondary stage, we discover Down syndrome early, provide stimulation for optimal development. The last stage is tertiary, support for families from society, like clinicians, therapists, and hospitals. How the intervention might work. Parent-mediated interventions come from naturalistic observations of bi-directional nature of adult-child interactions, whereby an increase in nonverbal or verbal communication from the child changes how the adult responds. In turn, helps to support further communication development in the child. The model of parent-mediated interventions is triadic, with an experienced clinician training parents to use specific interaction and language-promoting strategies with their children. The overall aims of parent-mediated interventions first is foster and increase adult-child interaction and joint attention through child-centered activities. Second, to promote the frequencies and complexity of adult responsivity to nonverbal and verbal communication. The last is facilitate language modeling and promoting from adults that helps the child to understand and produce language. There are 2 related programs. First is It Takes 2 to Talk by Hannah Parent Program, which is educating parents about the importance of child-oriented behaviors to promote joint attention and reciprocal interaction and help them to apply language facilitation strategies in natural everyday interactions. The other one is EMT, Enhanced Immediate Teaching, which combines elements of responsiveness education with behavior strategies and media teaching through modeling and environmental arrangements to reinforce children's communicative responses to adult promotes and teach target language goals. Although the conclusions of so many studies on family intervention are inconsistent, parents are indispensable to the effects of family intervention, whether in terms of the expression of children with Down syndrome or the improvement of social communication. Parent and clinician-mediated interventions is more effective than clinician-only mediated intervention, so we recommend to use Enhanced Immediate Teaching, which is EMT. The characteristics of EMT, it is a natural teaching procedure that uses child interests and initiations as opportunities for adults to model and promote language use in everyday context. The intervention also involves selecting words to target for each child based on their performance on the language test and simple complete parallel to intervention. The therapists and parent trainers had at least a bachelor degree related to child development or special education and were trained to criteria on the intervention procedures prior to working with children. They receive written information on each topic with individualized information on their child's language development. This is our references of our topic. We hope our presentation could give you a little more understanding on language and communication developed in Down syndrome. Thank you for watching.